Is this Edward Nygma's greatest caper ever? Well, let's hop into the pages of Batman One Bad Day, a brand new series, highlighting the Dark Knight's greatest and most famous foes, and find out together, shall we? Alrighty then, so this is a brand new one-shot story courtesy of Tom King. If you followed my channel for a long time, you'll know I didn't exactly love Tom King's time on Batman, but I thought enough time had passed and I enjoyed his Supergirl book, and even that Superman Dark Crisis tie-in was fun, so maybe it's time to give Mr. King a fresh new look and see what's going on. As we join the book, we're introduced to John Oates, a regular everyday Joe Schmo who is executed one day by the Riddler after leaving his office while trying to manage a family crisis. Obviously, Jim Gordon and the rest of the cops are pretty confused by this, as it completely goes against the Riddler's normal modus operandi. Where's the riddle? Where's the puzzle that needs to be solved? The cops arrest Nygma easily enough, but Ed only wants to talk to Batman. The only problem is the Dark Knight isn't taking his calls right now, thinking he's a loser and a failure and totally not worth his time. So instead, the Riddler opts to get under Gordon's skin by invoking the tragedies that befell his daughter during the events of Killing Joke, saying that the Joker, being such a wild man, wild card, would never have been able to discover where the Commissioner's daughter lived if he didn't help him. I know this new set of stories is called One Bad Day and it's referencing Killing Joke, but do we really need to go back and add more superfluous layers to that story? It feels like doing so is always flirting with disaster, but don't worry, this is the last Killing Joke reference we really get served, which makes it all the stranger that we got it. Now, while the Riddler may not have actually left a riddle at the crime scene, he does actually have one for Gordon. It's a famous old Sumerian riddle that Nygma claims is the oldest riddle ever told. There is a house, one enters it blind and comes out the other end seeing. What is it? Well, it's a schoolhouse, of course. It honestly had nothing to do with Nygma's conversation with Gordon and really only exists to set up a series of flashbacks wherein we're going to be delving into Nygma's time as a young man. Also, I'm like 90% sure he's wrong too in saying that that's the oldest riddle ever told. I'm pretty sure the oldest riddle is the riddle of the Sphinx, but I guess it wouldn't set up the flashback, would it? As we can see, Riddler spent his formative years at a prestigious academy wherein his abusive father also just so happened to be the headmaster who pushed him harder and harder for academic excellence, even going so far to physically, spiritually, and emotionally abuse young Edward when he was unable to reach the goals that his father had set for him. Yeah, I guess it makes sense for a Freudian reason as to why Riddler is such a dick in the future, but at the same time, what was wrong with just him being an asshole, who already felt he was smarter than everyone and because of that acted out and lorded it over everyone? There's a reason If You're So Smart, Why Aren't You Rich is still probably one of the greatest Riddler stories ever told because it speaks to his pettiness, but still, I digress. As we discover, young Edward didn't even come up with the riddle gimmick on his own. He only co-opted it from a teacher of his. That teacher's name was Mr. Yellen, and he would regularly put riddles at the end of his tests, riddles that a young Nygma could never solve, and because of that would end up getting a lower score, and his father would end up beating him because of it. Also, you probably wouldn't know this if you're under the age of like 40, which I assume most of my audience is, but Mr. Yellen looks like Mr. Cotter from the show Welcome Back, Cotter. In fact, he's basically the same character too, trying to enrich the life of Edward and his other students by being an irregular sort of teacher. It's just a shame that every time I see this character's face, it instantly takes me out of the story because I'm thinking to myself, oh my god, it's Gabe Kaplan in my comic book. Why is Gabe Kaplan here? Now, Bruce Wayne actually goes to this John Oates guy's funeral in an attempt to try and establish a motive for why Riddler would kill him. Only try as he might, though, even after talking to Oates' widow, he ends up finding nothing. It really does seem like Riddler just killed this guy for no reason, which is totally not his style. Batman vows to get to the bottom of this, even if it means torturing one of Riddler's most favorite henchmen. Oh yeah, that's another thing about this story. Batman is just kind of violent and brutal for no reason. He says that mercy is one of his greatest weaknesses, and we see him almost drown this guy in shark-infested waters. If nothing else, though, the favorite henchman does end up spilling his guts and saying that Riddler has been acting differently recently. Almost as if he got some bad news that's greatly affected the way he goes about his life as a supervillain. Hell, even in Arkham, he ends up taking perverse glee in killing the guy in the cell next to him. Well, actually, he talks the other guy into killing himself. At first, I thought thought that it was actually Joker, but it turns out that it's film freak Burton Weston. There's another little aside here that goes nowhere about Film Freak's will, which is basically just one giant script for an art film that he wants to be submitted to the Cannes Film Festival after he dies. Again, it has nothing to do with the Riddler story at all, it just kind of takes up space. Now back in young Edward's flashback, he goes to Mr. Cotter and asks why he keeps trying to ruin his life with all these riddles on the test, and if he keeps doing it, he's gonna report him to the higher-ups, dang blast it. Cotter goes on a whole speech about how he's trying to enrich Edward's life, and he knows he's a good kid and a smart kid, and that people like him, and that his father puts too much pressure on him to succeed and memorize facts and dates, but that isn't real intelligence. Real intelligence is being able to think laterally, and that he knows he'll all figure it out one day given enough time. Once again, this character confuses me because I don't know if Tom King actually believes what he's saying via this teacher or if he's secretly making fun of him, because as we're gonna find out by the end, Mr. Yellen Cotter here is so totally wrong about everything when it comes to Edward. Now, back in the present with Batman, he manages to chase a lead all the way down to some ramshackle house in the middle of the woods. It's there he finds Edward Nygma's father, whose last name is not Nygma, that's something Edward took later. Papa Nygma goes on a whole spiel about how his son was such a special child and he had such high hopes and aspirations for his kid, but he ultimately let them down because Ed is truly an idiot. A man more obsessed with games and playing dress-up than he is any actual academic achievements. Papa Nygma also lets two other important pieces of information slip. One, he hasn't talked to his son in 30 years after something went down at a basketball court, and also that Edward's mother is a prostitute. Now back over with the Riddler, he actually makes a daring escape from Arkham Asylum by threatening the lives of the guards' families. If this scene seems super familiar to you, it absolutely should, because Tom King wrote the exact same thing for the Riddler in the War of Jokes and Riddles story. Yes, he's copying himself, but at least he has the good sense of humor to joke about how this time Riddler doesn't have stupid mutton chops. Only instead of just walking out of Arkham custody like he did in War of Jokes and Riddles, instead we gotta get a little bit more edgy by having the guards forced to shoot each other, which honestly doesn't make a lick of goddamn sense to me. If these guys really thought Riddler was such a threat to themselves and their families, why didn't they shoot him? I mean, they were totally cool killing somebody. Seriously, it's like this story really wants you to forget that Edward Nygma is just some pencil-necked geek, but the worst of that is actually still very much yet to come. Batman, we see, actually does manage to track down Nygma's mother, only she's already dead, as we hear from a neighbor that this old working gal was still seeing regulars on the side. One night a younger man comes to see her, starts asking all sorts of questions that she just can't seem to answer. Not long after that, no one ever saw her again. Now in the final set of flashbacks, we see a young Edward actually break into his father's files to try and steal the answer key for Mr. Cotter's next test. Only, here's the thing, Mr. Cotter assumed that Edward would try that, and so he changed the riddle at the last second, meaning that Edward once again gave the wrong answer. He couldn't even cheat right. Cotter once again tries to turn this into an after-school special teachable moment about what Edward's gonna do with his life and how he can't just be an insufferable know-it-all and that one day he's gonna have to learn to be a kid and relax and unwind. Edward, of course, does not take any of this advice to heart, instead saying that Cotter cheated before assaulting him and eventually murdering the man right there on the basketball court. The very same basketball court that Batman ends up finding Nygma on after he escaped. It's here where the Riddler ends up revealing what you probably already know if you're paying attention, and that is he had no reason at all to kill John Oates, it was just a random murder. Nygma had decided that these puzzles and games that he's been playing with Batman all throughout the years have actually just been a crutch. They've been holding him back. Because deep down, Nygma was always smarter than Batman. Making it a riddle, making it a puzzle was the only way to make it fair for Batman, who, by the way, he absolutely knows he's Bruce Wayne and he knows who all the sidekicks are too. Riddler came to this change of heart after confronting his prostitute mother and eventually murdering her. Because you see, deep down, Batman, the greatest riddle was in me all along. People can be riddles too. And now that I've solved myself. You can't ever stop me, because if you try to, I'm just gonna kill another random person and their blood will be on your hands, so there. That's why I killed that random John Oates guy, to show just how serious I am about the new Riddler. No, really, that is Nygma's plan, and you know what? Batman is horrified by this. Oh, he got me! Even though if you've read comics for any amount of time, you'll know that that's just kind of a thing that happens. Batman arrests villains, they break out, they kill more people, it's a dance they do forever, but for some reason, this really sticks Batman up. So much to the point that in just a couple months, Riddler ends up taking over all of Gotham. The cops can't stop him, the mob can't stop him, even the National Guard are afraid to go after him and his big brain. Again, if this was Joker or someone doing this, I might be able to buy it, because the Joker is unpredictable and no one knows anything about him, meaning no one knows what he's actually capable of, but it's Edward Nygma. He's a dweeb. Just shoot him. Batman is at such a loss, the only person he can actually talk to is John Oates' widow. They end up talking about that family crisis from the beginning of the issue, and oh, wouldn't you know it, what John's daughter was going through is actually very similar to what Edward was going through, and he ended up killing a guy who probably would have been a better father to him than his actual father was. But what this really does is inspire Batman to basically do what Riddler did, but for himself. Hey, you know what, if the Riddler can change his gimmick, if he can go beyond doing the thing that he's known for, then maybe Batman can too. Because, you know, the big problem with being so smart is you don't think anyone could ever get one over on you, but Batman does end up getting one over on the Riddler by tricking him into thinking that a recording of Batman talking is actually him on the roof. This gives Batman the opening he needs to get up behind the Riddler, and, well, it's implied that he murders him too. Yay, a happy ending, I guess? And so that was Batman One Bad Day Riddler issue number 1, and overall I thought this was kind of a mixed bag, made up of a lot of the things that I like about Tom King's work and a lot of the things that I don't. First things first, if you needed me at all to tell you, Mitch Gerads draws a beautiful comic. Seriously, this is one of the best looking books I've seen all year. It's wonderfully moody and atmospheric. The use of green color tones throughout is positively genius. As far as the writing goes, though, hey, you know what, say what you want about Tom King, but you can always pretty much tell what's going on in the man's personal life by what he's writing at the moment. Batman, Heroes in Crisis, Mr. Miracle were basically all about depression. But with this story, that Supergirl book, that Superman one-shot, I get the distinct feeling that Tom King is really thinking about being a parent over the last little bit, and it really resonates in this story too. Was it Riddler's bad rearing that made him into an evil supervillain, or was he always kind of a dickbag? My big problem though with this story is really, when you stop and think about it, the main question posed here is, what is the Riddler without Riddles? And the answer is not much, just kind of a schmuck in green. Or at least that's my view on things. Tom King seems to think that the Riddler without Riddles would be absolutely unstoppable because he's just that smart and just that good and just that much of a devious chess master. Even though personally I don't see it, and most of the stuff that Nygma actually does in this story feels much more in line with something the Joker would do than the Riddler would do. For what it's worth though, this wasn't the worst Riddler story I've ever read. In fact, it's not even the worst Tom King Riddler story I've ever read. Overall, I would actually end up giving this one a 7 out of 10. I didn't hate reading it.
Hey there everyone, Cape Joel again, and I want to thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. As always, if you liked what you see, be sure to like, subscribe, comment. It really helps drive engagement and helps me out too. Also, if you are a patron, which you can become for as little as $1 a month, you will get exclusive content that no one else can ever see, and you'll get to see the Comic Multiverse podcast before anyone else too. You can check out all this and more down in the description. And until next time everyone, this has been Cape Joel, and I'll see you all next time. Cheers.